back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I am joined by Ryan Brewer. He's a photographer and filmmaker. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you for agreeing to come on. It means a lot to me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Ryan's short concept film is called Familiar. It's available now on YouTube. If you go down here, check out the links in the description. You'll be able to check that out. Also, make sure you're checking out his Instagram for his photography, his Facebook as well. It's all down here in the description. Now, I do want to ask you, there's something we've talked about. As of right now, Familiar is a short film, but you are eventually planning on adapting that into a feature. Is that correct?
Yes, the script has already been written. It was written a long time ago, and I've since then been tinkering with it and just refining it since then. And the goal was to make it a feature film right from the very beginning, but I knew that we wouldn't be able to get it right off the ground, right off the bat, so we went with a shorter version of it to start.
Well, that's how it goes a lot of the times. I mean, sometimes you get the short. Saw started out as a short film, and look at where that went.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes that's the route that we have to take, and especially right now with COVID and quarantine and all that, maybe doing the short originally was a good idea because this is giving you the time to really work out the kinks and all the script, really.
Yeah.
And it those that are fans of not only filmmaking, but photography, Ryan is awesome. He has always, right now you got the holiday theme going on your Instagram, which I really, truly enjoy. A whole lot of fun. So make sure you guys are checking this stuff out. Make sure you're following him. He's put a lot of hard work in not only filmmaking, but his photography. He does a great job with both. So anything else you got coming up here in the works that you could talk about, or?
I'm currently developing another short film. This is one, the star of Familiar, actually, Kay Peterson, and I had been talking about doing something a little more serious and less horror-esque, but more than anything, we just want to make something. So we kind of been throwing a story idea around for a while now, and I don't want to go into too many details on what that story entails, but it's definitely not going to be my usual. Stepping outside the comfort zone a little bit here on that one. And then other than that, just working really hard on getting Familiar made.
Good, man. And anytime you have any updates, please feel free to shoot them my way. I'd be more than happy to promote anything I can. I know you said your new one you're working on isn't really a horror movie. Doesn't matter. If you need any help with any type of promotion, make sure you let me know. Make sure you guys are following his links, like I said, so you can get updated on all the work he's doing as well. But today, my friend, we are here to see where it started for you. The first horror movie you watched, and your first horror movie was?
The Exorcist.
The Exorcist.
Right there. There she is. Oh, my goodness.
Do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen it?
Gosh, I want to say I was 7 or 8 the first time I watched that movie, which is way too young to be watching The Exorcist.
It really is.
Yeah, it was definitely a traumatic experience, and it's hard for me to actually remember the exact day, but I do remember just having shivers watching that movie. Like, that's how scared I was. It was just, it was a whole body experience for me as a child.
Oh, and it's funny because I've talked about this on the podcast before. The Exorcist is one of those movies that you can watch as a child and watch as an adult and feel completely scared for different reasons. Me as a parent now, I have a son and 2 little girls. So as a parent of 2 little girls, watching that movie as an adult really hits me in a different way than it did watching it as a kid.
Yeah. And I got 2 kids of my own too, and 2 little boys. And I can't even imagine what would be going through. I should be able to, because I saw it when I was a kid, but for some reason as an adult, I can't see it the same way anymore. It's a whole different experience now versus how when I first watched it as a kid. And I can remember just the nightmares that came with it too. I mean, I don't even know. I couldn't tell you a specific nightmare. I just know that for a good week after watching that movie, it was just really, really hard to sleep and to not think the worst, most gruesome things in the world that were inspired from that movie. And it's just crazy to think about.
And especially when we're kids, watching another kid go through this, watching a kid be evil was really hard. Well, you didn't have a lot of that then when we were young. And I'm not going to get too much into it because people on the podcast have heard me say it enough, but the reason The Exorcist is so special to me is because my parents owned a video store and I used to be able to watch whatever movies I wanted. And The Exorcist is the only movie that my mother ever shut off and told me I couldn't watch. So for me, it will always have that stigma around it. Obviously, I ended up watching it, and I love the film. As a film, it's absolutely beautiful, and it changed so much in the world of horror. And it's one of those films that it's hard to pick out a certain scene. But if you had to pick out one scene that affected you the most, what would that scene be?
So when I was a kid, the scene that always got to me was the crucifix masturbation scene. There's just something very weird and visceral about that scene. That's just, yeah, as a kid, you don't really quite understand what's going on. But like the older I got and the more experience I got in life, the more that scene just continued to affect me. Like my brain would go back to that scene, be like, oh, wow, that's what that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Violent.
Yeah. As an adult, though, when they released the director's cut version in 2000, it was the crab walk scene. Like that scene made that movie scary again for me for some reason. And I just came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting that at all when I popped that DVD in for the first time to watch it. And then she comes down those stairs all fast and backwards and crab-like. And I was actually just reading up on it, but before we got together on this, and I was going through like the trivia and how they shot the scene and the contortionist they got to do it, and they had to digitally remove the wires and everything because they actually did have her on a harness and wires going downstairs for safety reasons, obviously.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, just the first time I saw that scene as an adult, like instantly that shiver came back, and then it went through the whole movie again, and I was like, oh my God, I'm 7 years old again. This is great.
That's honestly why I like talking about these first horror movies, because it takes you back and you feel that fear again of watching it. And you go, when I first tell you about it, you really start thinking about it and you're like, man, what was it? And then it hits you and you're like, oh yeah. And you start to get all the smells and the feelings again.
Go ahead.
I
was just going to say one of the crazy things about The Exorcist too, and something that has always stuck with me, is that if there's anything truly positive that came out of a 7-year-old watching that movie, it's that every movie that I watched after that, it was a lot easier to watch. Nothing was as scary to me as The Exorcist, because it had just somehow prepared me, I guess, for everything that was yet to come. So for all the Friday the 13th, all the Nightmare on Elm Streets, all Predator, Alien movies, watching all those movies was nothing. It was a lot easier for me to get through those movies without being terrified, and all because of The Exorcist.
And like you said, what a good way to start. It's one of those movies, like you said, you're going from 0 to 60 there. You didn't even crawl. You went from the crib to running.
Exactly. Exactly.
Crawling and walking were a whole lot easier once you've already started running. So I get that. When someone brings up The Exorcist, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Reagan. I mean, everything about Reagan in that movie. That's the imagery, her dialogue. I mean, some of the things that she says in that movie are just crazy, off the wall stuff. And, nowadays it's probably not as controversial to hear some of those, someone say something like that. But, I don't know if we can swear. Can we swear?
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So so like to quote me, like when your mother sucks cocks in hell, it's who says that in the 70s,
and especially a little girl.
Yeah.
The voice is coming from a little girl's body.
Exactly.
And funny enough, the first time I ever got my mouth washed out with soap is because of The Exorcist, because I heard her say that. And so for then on, like kind of cocksucker kind of stayed in my brain. And I was playing Spy versus Spy for the Nintendo. And I just remember calling
nice.
I think it was the Black Spy, calling him a cocksucker and getting my mouth washed out. And I was like, this is bullshit. I hate The Exorcist more now. So it's funny you say that, man. It's funny how these scenes can connect for different reasons.
I got my mouth
washed out. We talked about The Exorcist, and that's something that, obviously everybody loves The Exorcist. It's a golden movie, I think. And I think it really ushered in a new era of horror. And I compare it to the Blair Witch Project in the fact that people didn't know what they were getting into when they seen this. It was something that the Blair Witch was right borderline internet era. So People didn't know if this was real or not. You couldn't just pull Google out of your pocket and figure it out. So that's where I get much respect for The Exorcist, because the marketing on that movie alone was completely brilliant. And with The Exorcist, you had people that were crying, puking, leaving the theater. Like, that movie caused something that, and it was art. And it really, people were uncomfortable because of the thought of how scary it truly was, because demonic possession is something that human beings have experienced all throughout time. And so the possibility of this being real and happening to a child, it really terrified people. And to the point where they're still making offshoot Exorcist or exorcism type movies to this day that would have never happened without this original one. So we talked about
even outside of the movie itself, like, it got banned from some theaters, but even the trailer got banned because it was a Pazuzu's face, the demon's face, like constantly flashing on screen, and it was deemed too scary. And so they pulled the trailer out of several theaters. I think mostly overseas, but I mean, that's just crazy.
And especially that's really a kudos that you're doing something right. If you're scaring people so bad they have to pull it, that would never happen to. So
I mean, I don't think
this was your first movie. Now I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball here. Something I didn't tell you I was going to ask you. I do this to everybody. The Exorcist was your first movie, but I'm going to go scream on you here, Ryan. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie?
My favorite horror movie. I got to admit that's an extremely tough question to answer, and I get asked it all the time, and I don't know if I could ever pick just one, because I love horror movies so much that I love them all for very different reasons. The Exorcist I love because of its nostalgia value for me as a kid, being my first horror movie. But I think it would probably have to be. I'm going to go with the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Actually,
beautiful.
I've always loved. He's my favorite of the slashers from that era, and I always enjoyed his movies. And I think it wasn't long after The Exorcist that I first got introduced to the Nightmare movies. So it was just kind of the progression from there. And once Freddy kind of became a little less serious and started getting more quippy and stuff like that as a kid, that's a character that you can strangely get into as a child. Jason never talks, neither does Michael Myers. So it's tough to pull that relation as a kid, but you can still love those movies and still love them from what they are. But as far as characters go, Freddy really is a character.
Yeah.
And
he was always the same guy. It's not just a different guy in the mask every time. It's always Robert Englund until the remake. And Super Freddy, which was awful.
Yes.
But it's funny you say that, because I'm my favorite horror movie of all time is House. Obviously, I think it's absolutely amazing. It's something that it was my first horror movie, and I think maybe, like you said, with nostalgia value, I really enjoyed The Cabin in the Woods. I thought that was a really good for a more modern horror movie. I thought that was great. But if you take out the last 3.5 minutes of the original Nightmare on Elm Street, if you end it with Freddy burning in the bed, it's the perfect movie. Not just the perfect horror movie, the perfect movie to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the blow up doll at the end and the Freddy car. I get you got to set up the sequel, and the studio totally ruined Wes Craven's dream there. But I think if you could just take that last little bit out on Nightmare on Elm Street, when it comes to the practical effects, the budget they had, it only had 4 kills, but they really went with quality over quantity. When you look at the Johnny Depp, the hanging, Tina's death, I mean, it's such a fantastic, phenomenal movie, and I love talking. What's that?
I was going to say, like, Tina's death especially, that was a very innovative way of shooting the scene with the rotating room. Like, when you hear about the behind the scenes stuff on that, I'm like, that's just really, really cool how they shot. Like, I would have never thought of that. That would have never occurred to me. Like, if I was on the set trying to figure out, how are we going to do this? Like, just use wires. But to actually rotate the room so that it looks like she's crawling on the ceiling like that, and then they just strap, I can't remember his name now, but her boyfriend,
Rod, Jesus Garcia.
They just strapped him down so that he wouldn't be moving. It would have never occurred to me, And
all the practical effects in that movie, something that's, like the waterbed kill looks great even to this day. A scene I talk about a lot. I just did my Nightmare on Elm Street franchise ranking, and one of the scenes I talk about is where they put the spandex over top of the wall and they push their face out over Nancy's bed. That looks so good. Like, even today, that looks really, really good on the budget that they had. And Freddy Krueger's only in A Nightmare on Elm Street for 7 minutes.
Yep.
Like, that's how iconic he still was, that they knew they had to build off him after 7 minutes of him being in a film.
Yeah. And I can definitely agree on that last 3 minutes. Because I mean, even if you cut it out, there's always the possibility of doing sequels. You didn't need that last 3 minutes to set up what, Freddy's Revenge, which, whatever with Freddy's Revenge, but I have.
See, Freddy's Revenge to me is that one that's right in the middle. I don't have a lot of good to say about it, and I don't have a lot of bad to say about it. It's just right. It's just there to me.
That's kind of where I sit too. I mean, I honestly think that from like a cinematic standpoint, the movie's actually really good. And it does a lot of the similar things with the narrative that the first movie does, like not really keeping, like Freddy's not really in the limelight. It does still have that kind of serious tone to it. He's still not the quippy type yet. He didn't become that till the third movie. And so, I mean, as far as sequels go, I think it was a very awkward kind of movie for the 80s and controversial even, with the homoeroticism going on in the movie. And in the 80s, that was just kind of a big deal. And even when you're a kid, it's kind of you don't really get it. It's just kind of a weird thing to see on screen. So I do think that movie gets more hate than it deserves. It definitely does not deserve that much hate. But
there's titties in every slasher movie, man. If you can't handle some man ass for a couple minutes, get real, man. I'm with you. Like, I love the poolside massacre, but at the same time, how does it happen? Is Freddy through Jesse? Like, there's just a lot of questions I have about this movie that never get answered. Freddy never really possesses any other person in the franchise, so there's just a lot of, it's really that black sheep where there's so many questions that don't get answered because the sequel just Dream Warriors just completely forgets it even existed. And Dream Warriors really is the true sequel to Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like, to me,
it really is.
Dream Warriors really builds right where Nightmare on Elm Street left off.
And I would have loved to have someday, I mean, I can't do it now, but I would have loved to have been able to sit down with Wes Craven and get his like real like detailed thoughts on what he thought it would have been like if they, because like to this day I think it would be kind of interesting to know or to find out if what would it be like if that was the movie that they continued to follow, if they hadn't done the complete 180 with Dream Warriors and they instead decided to keep following Freddy's Revenge and that sort of serious side of things. Part of me almost kind of wonders if Freddy would have fizzled out a lot faster.
It's funny to think that, because I think that if Freddy would have been darker all the way through, I think he would have fizzled faster. Because if you remember in the late 80s, early 90s, they had Freddy doing like Pepsi commercials and he was on like Nick Jr. It's like, this dude kills kids in the movie and he's like the spokesperson for Pepsi.
I think I believe he hosted a Headbangers Ball on MTV once.
It's like that just
shows what was it? I know he hosted on MTV a couple of times.
It's like, this dude's a child killer in his movies. Like, this is what we're doing with him.
I don't know. I don't know. It's really weird how he became sort of the hero of the story in a way.
The charisma. Robert Englund is just amazing. So we always end these, my friends, with the same thing. We always end it with a skull count. We are going to go back to The Exorcist. We're ranking it on a skull count on overall production and quality of the movie, how you feel about the movie, how it scared you. 0 skulls being the worst, 5 being the best. Where did you rank The Exorcist?
Oh, I would definitely give The Exorcist a 5. I mean, I think it deserves it on every level, from the cinematography to the performances, the story, the subtext of that story. I mean, it really is a great overall film. Like, even if it wasn't as horror centric as it is, it would still probably be a great film. And
absolutely,
that's the real legacy of that movie, is that it's not just another horror movie.
Right.
An overall great piece of cinema.
It really is. It's such a great movie. And like I said, the effect will live on forever. I think it will always have that effect on me. And I think it'll always have its place in history. So I do want to remind everybody, make sure you're clicking the links down here in the description. Make sure you're watching the short film. Make sure that you are supporting all our indie actors, indie directors, indie photographers, just by following the page, liking, and checking out what they're doing. It really means a lot to all of us to see that. Don't go anywhere. I got a couple more questions for you, my friend.
Okay.
Everybody else, keep talking horror. Stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.